Hi guys, it's Gary here from IAIA 16 in Nagoya. To my first upload, if you want to call it that way, is going to be about the Japanese impact assessment system. It's quite interesting. It's quite different from most of the ones in Australia. It has some similarities to South Australia, so I'll go through it with you. Um, Japan is set up as having the national government and then having prefectures, which are like our states. The way EIA works, the way the environment is defined, is that effectively it's the same at all levels, unlike in the Australian system. So what happens is that proposals get categorised into three classes, or I think they're called classes, 1, 2 and 3. If you're in the first class of project, which are major infrastructure usually, then it automatically triggers an impact assessment under the Environmental Impact Assessment Law. Class 2 projects is discretionary as to whether or not they'll go through EIA, and the others get delegated down to the prefectures and they can do impact assessment if they wanted to. So that's the first part of it. Second part is that the overall process is actually driven by the proponent, and it's the EIS document which is significant, and so which has some similarities, I think, to the South Australian system. So what happens is that if we look at, we know Class 1 automatically get assessment. Class 2 ones have to go through a screening process, and the screening process is decided by the authorising agency, which is the department responsible for the project. They call them ministries here, and it could, if it's for a major road, it'll be Department of Roads or Ministry for Roads and so on. So they'll make a decision as to whether impact assessment is required or not. If it is, they then the proponent then has to decide. Oh, by the way, the role of the Minister for the Environment here is quite limited. What the Minister for the Environment can do is draw up guidelines to help the authorising agency to make a decision to assess or not assess. So the Minister Environment has no direct role, only a guidance role through policy or guidelines. So, and there's actually a kind of a public input part to that, where the proposal gets advertised, and there are some opinions. They call them opinions here, can be sought from the prefecture governor as to whether assessment is required or not, and but that feeds back into the assessing agency, also the authorising agency, who decides whether to assess or not. Then we get to the scoping stage and preparation of I guess terms of reference or scoping document. That's again the role of the proponent to do that, and what it can then do is in effect produce a draft for public comment, and that goes out the general public, and copies get sent through to the prefecture governor, who then sends it on to the individual mayors from the cities. The public makes comment on the draft scoping document, and that goes to the proponent. The proponent then summarises that and sends that back to the governor, who also sends it on to the mayors. Now the governor then so that summary of submissions goes to the governor. The governor then collects all those opinions and then forms his own or her own opinion about the scoping document and sends that back to the proponent, who then decides whether to accept all or none or some of those changes into their scoping document. They then go away and start doing all the works, and we get to the EIS stage, and there are effectively 3 EIS documents. There's a draft one, which is prepared, and that goes out for comment. Very similar process to the scoping document as well. It goes out to general public as well as the governor and the mayors. Same thing happens. It goes out, opinions or submissions, we call them here, they call them opinions here, go to the proponent. He or she summarises those and sends those to the governor, who sends those out to the mayors, or goes back to the governor, who then provides his comment or her comment back to the proponent. Proponent can then take those into account. It's not required to by law, but can take them into account, and then prepares the EIS. So we've gone from draft now to EIS. And now this is in this stage, the EIS then goes to the authorising agency. who then is not required to, but um, if, uh, if there are significant environmental issues, should send it to the Minister of the Environment. My suspicion is that it happens mostly and as a matter of course, but there's no requirement to send it to the Minister. The Minister then can forms his or her own opinion, sends that back to the authorising agency, who then looks at all of that in its own opinion and sends that to the proponent, who then takes that into account and then prepares the final EIS, which then, once that's gone out public, is final. That is it, and that is what, in a sense, will happen from an environmental perspective. So what we have here is that we don't have, there's no specific environmental condition. You can see there's no independent assessing agency. It's driven primarily by the proponent, and once that EIS is finally advertised, then that's final. And so the EIS document pretty much contains all the design, how the proposal is going to be designed and implemented, all the commitments they're made. So there are no specific environmental conditions per se in this case. It's all contained in that final EIS document. Now the authorising agency has to give approval to it, obviously, and taking into account the final EIS. There is a requirement under the Environmental Impact Assessment Law where the Minister can step in and not allow the proposal if he or she forms a view that the proposal would be environmentally unacceptable. Now, I'm not 100% sure about that process. I need to do a bit more homework on that, but it's kind of like a fail-safe apparently for that. So then there's obviously follow-up that has to go on, the normal stuff. And again, proponents responsible for all that and reporting on all of that. So long and short, this is an interesting process in that that the screening is set out in terms of three categories. One, definite EIA. Two, maybe EIA. Three, not EIA, but could happen at the prefecture level. The decision about screening is made by the authorising agency, which is the department responsible for the project, rather than the Environment Agency. Minister sets guidelines, and then from here on, it's pretty much how the proponent fine-tunes its EIS, taking into account public submissions, which are primarily driven or managed by the governor of the prefecture. And that's pretty much it.